Hello and welcome to this video. What is a song? How do we define a song? Earlier this week, I saw a video by Rick Beato where he was assessing the New York Times article that named the 30 greatest living American songwriters. And I did a little bit of a video about it and I talked about it, did all the normal stuff. But as I was doing that video, I became very aware that I needed somehow to define what I meant by a song and what they would mean by a song, and also to embed into that definition some idea of what makes a good song. In other words, what are the virtues of a song that when done well make it a good song. So on this Philosophy Sunday video, I can never say philosophy, I always get it wrong, you know, why did I come up with this stupid name? Anyway, on this video, I am going to talk my way through it. This is going to be a proper Philosophy Sunday video. There's going to be no graphics. It's me talking into a camera. I have got a starting point, but I have no end points, and we're going to see where we end up. And so if you want to, you know, make yourself a cup of tea, or maybe you're doing a bit of gardening, or I don't know, tidying your room up, this could waffle away in the background, and you can follow the arguments. And if you enjoy it, please put a like on the video and subscribe, because these videos don't do so well on the views, but I feel they do, it's probably they're a little bit more virtuous and worthy than just silly comedy videos or me going through various top tens. So I don't want to lose this aspect of my channel. So please stick a like on it and subscribe, especially if you haven't subscribed. I've noticed recently that I've been unsubscribed to certain channels. So if you look down and realize that you've been unsubscribed, just subscribe again. That would be great. So let's boil down the song. Right, where do we go back? Do we go back to the singer-songwriters of the 1960s, or do we go back to sort of the Tim Panelli songwriters of the 1920s or 30s? Do we look at the tradition of vaudeville in America, or go back to the minstrel songs that happened before then? Or in my country, do we go back to musical? What about opera? What about light opera? What about heavy opera? Where does that come from? What about hymns? What about football chants? Right, we go back, we can go back, we can go back, right? And the song is always there. And I think we can imagine a point in history that we go back to where we are now in a pre-literate point in history. In other words, there's no writing, right? Now, writing is invented. It's a thing that the elites do. The writings are elite. Then you have the invention of the printing press, and that now spreads writing out. And that's all comparatively recent in human history. We only have to go back, say, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years, and we're in a place where the only way to transfer information is by putting it into spoken word. And of course, spoken word is really hard to remember. Now, one of my daughter's friends at school was telling me of a way that a technique that they'd utilised to remember stuff for their exam. It was basically to turn it into a song. Songs help us remember stuff. You could hear a song, you could sing it, and the reason is because you enjoy it. It's enjoyable to sing in a communal setting. It's enjoyable, you know, brings everybody together. So I imagine there was millennia where information was passed on through songs. And these songs could have been like, don't eat those berries, but you can eat those berries. Don't go walking over there because there's quicksand. It could have been stuff like that. And these moral virtues that people were like delineating, if they were useful, would sort of evolve in a way to becoming the storage of virtuous ideas. And virtue is really, really important. So I would say there has to be something in a song that transmits information and transmits information in a way which is useful to the other person, that there's useful information being transmitted. Now, as the centuries passed, these songs would have then been linked into the sort of structural embodiment of virtue, which is religions. And religions offered to answer the big questions of who we are, why we were here, what happened before, what's going to happen after we die. And I think for many religions, there must have been a song aspect. So if we think about Islam, for example, the Quran is taught and people memorize it because they sing it. As in Europe, especially in Greece and Rome, we start to see the development of some sort of thing approaching a more modern civilization where ideas of truth and science and all these things start to shift. There is a collectivization of people into cities, which means that they can then not just be a member of the tribe, but they can then, one can be like make shoes and the other one can make, bows and arrows or whatever. And so people start to become the role that they take on in the city. And within that, within the city state, we start to get what I imagine is the beginning of drama or comedy. And we see that in the two faces in sort of Greek arts, the happy face representing comedy and the drama face here. And there is within Greek culture the idea of the dialectic in terms of a conversation between two people, whether it's the conversation between Socrates and whoever the interlocutor, the bloke he was chatting to is, or the idea of the Greek chorus, which remarks on the action that's going on stage. So now songs get linked to storytelling, and this storytelling can have a moral virtue, can't it? You see? This is what songs do. Okay, so this starts to develop, and we see that all the vocal music forms are trying to instill what I would say is something that is profound about our existence. Merely just passing on information does not make it that useful pragmatically in terms of virtue. It's much better to offer something that helps people on an emotional level, in a way. And stories also do this. And so I now become very interested in this split between serious songs, singing really depressing songs about sailors going away to sea and getting VD or whatever we get in most, British folk songs, but more so the development of comedy songs. Comedy songs actually predate stand-up comedy itself, all sorts of different things, sketches, all the things that we see as comedy in the 20th century are actually rooted in song and dance routines. Here, by the beginning of the 19th century, we have music hall, and music hall is people singing songs. Some of these songs were sad and about terrible things happening to people, and the other ones are funny. So I think this idea of the dramatic idea from Greece, which is the antidote to religious, because obviously in my country we had hymns and that was the embodiment of that side. But this idea of secular singing, and that it can be funny or it can be serious, that there's a join between the two. This really lays the foundation for the folk forms that then travel to America and shatter and dissipate through all the different mixing that's going on in that country. And they get all turned upside down, and then the message of America, the idea of the American dream, that idea of that virtue, which is at odds with, say, slavery, is at odds with the treatment of Native Americans, right? The contradiction that's inherent in America sort of gets wound into that songwriting, okay? There is the history of political singing, if you imagine the national anthem, or say the sort of socialist songs that were sung. And so I think we can then see a political dimension coming to songwriting. We can think of the protests of people singing, whatever they sing, depending what process you're on, you know. So we now have to factor in the great shift that happens in the 20th century in terms of music. We invent recording, and it turns music upside down, and all these communal aspects and all these functional things that must have been quite obvious to everybody. You know, we go to a football match and we're all part of the same team, so we sing a song about we want to win. We go to church and we sing a song about how great God is, and all the creatures are bright and beautiful, and they're also great and small, and then they're all made by God, and we can all sing that together. And this communal aspect keeps coming up. Or we go down to the local tavern and we sing a sad song about a sailor going across the sea and getting VD, right? And we all sing that. We go, oh, isn't it sad that happened? And we all feel this communal aspect because we're involved in it. Everybody can sing, but then suddenly the thing shifts. Now, high art had almost lowered the status of the song. Okay, now this comes from another Greek concept. It's the Pythagorean concept of the music of the spheres. The absolute music contains some sort of revelation of God or revelation of perfection, or later on in the history of Western civilization, it embodies the genius of the artist. This emerges in the Romantic period, and it's a challenge to the idea that you are singing about God and revealing the beauty of the universe. The all things bright and beautiful aspect of the song gets taken over in terms of a hierarchy of virtue by absolute music that doesn't have words. Now, I know that I fall into the trap of thinking like that. I feel that instrumental jazz, for example, is a higher form from an expression or art point of view than, say, Ella Fitzgerald. I know it's not. I know it shouldn't be. And I see Ella Fitzgerald as being more accessible because the voice is on there and normal people can identify because they need the voice in there. But the ability to tune into the messages of absolute music, which then goes back to the harmony and the rhythms and how they relate to the music of the spheres, how they relate to the universe around it. It reveals something about the universe to us. And when you listen to John Coltrane playing through Giant Steps, he is searching. I have that romantic idea of the hero searching for a way in sort of Western civilization to reach a place of peace and balance through breaking the very system of harmony, breaking the straitjacket of ratio, breaking through from the idea of the rational to the irrational, which is embodied in harmony and disharmony. All those things become a heroic act, and those things are seen as being great. But by the same token, that romantic ideal is taken by all the 20th century art forms, and it starts to develop into this idea of the audience and the artist. Now that's in front of us. It was a time when, you know, to hear Beethoven, you would have had to be part of a certain, you know, educated elite and be able to be in a certain place where you could go and sit down and hear highly trained musicians that were part of that specialism that comes from civilization, churning their way through Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, so you could appreciate it and go, my God, this is the embodiment of the genius of Beethoven. But for most people, they didn't have that. They had going down the tavern and you know, and having to just, you know, get their kicks from the sailor with VD. So there's a split. The audience is separated by the technologies that emerge in the 20th century. We suddenly have these new art forms, and they are from mass production. They are also from technology and the ownership of technology. So the capitalists are going, right, we have this technology. How do we make money out of it? Thomas Edison wasn't a great inventor as such. He was great at seeing the money-making potential of the light bulb, of having light in your house, or having a cinema, or having, you know, records or music. You know, this starts to get straight away, starts to be commodified, is that the word? And with that is the discovery, which was counterintuitive, that it's not all the great opera and Beethoven that's going to sell the records. Oh no, it is this sort of weird folk music, but it's the novelty of this folk music, which America's full of. And so suddenly this sort of naive folk music, underpinned by the advanced musical aspects of jazz. You put those two things together. So if you see jazz as being the technology which is delivering the music now, and it's sophisticated in that it could shift for this new technology. The jazz musicians go and say, what do you want? Classical musicians say, we're playing Vivaldi, that's what we're playing, it doesn't change. No, jazz musicians, what do you want? You want a voiceover? Shall we stop here? I'll get close to the microphone, I'll move away, I'll make some noises, we'll do that, I'll laugh on my instrument, that'll make me... And this idea of happiness and sadness, all this starts to rebound. And you get the high and the low together. And when this is recorded and put out, right, it starts to sell millions. And the recording industry goes, well, what's over here? What's going on over here? And... we go into the jazz age, and the jazz age is a cultural point where people start to move away from that Victorian view of the world, and they're looking for new voices. And suddenly, in the music of folk America and the music of black America, well, there's all this new stuff going on. But it's happening at the same time as film's developing. Now, film is interesting because as soon as film is made, they start telling stories and characters appear on film. And we really have to mention an actress called Theda Bara. She was one of the very first film stars. It's interesting it was a woman. She was the original vamp. In other words, her presence on screen, it seduced and brought you in. And it's the look in the eyes where she would look into your soul, the ability to look into the camera like that, which we see emerging in cinema art straight away, creates this larger-than-life, godlike character. By the time we get to 1926, when Rudolph Valentino dies, he is seen in a way where that seduction puts him on a pedestal of being almost godlike. And this brings in the idea of the superstar, the star, the person that does not exist in this earthly realm, but exists out there. And the record industry slowly develops this over the 20th century. And so we now have the singer with the seduction. Imagine Rudolph Valentino, but he can sing. And he has that presence. And the songs that everyone knows are being seen in the musicals that are coming out of Hollywood. And now we have a dynamic of people sat at home, whether it be Irving Berlin or George Gershwin and then Cole Porter or Rodgers and Hammerstein or wherever it is, they're sat there writing a song and imagining they are in this story in the cinema, the story, the folk music story, And so you get, there's this girl, she's a little girl, and she lives on this farm, and she wants to escape the farm, and she dreams of another place, but she also loves everybody there. But then this whirlwind comes in, and she gets taken up in the whirlwind, she gets dropped in the world of Oz. But before she goes there, she dreams of going to that place, and it's almost like a utopian dream of a little girl where she imagines what it's like across over the rainbow. And the songwriter who wrote that is writing it knowing that that's the story. They're not writing from their own soul, but they are expressing something that's in the character in the story. And this becomes the first great motivator of 20th century music. So I think the story and the moral aspect of the story you're telling is really important. You need to tell a decent story. I think that's a virtue that's come out of that. And you can imagine that you're somebody else, which means there's a universalism to this. You could sing a song that people can identify with, even though it might not be about them, and it might not even be about you. As I said in the original video, there's a great difference between Joni Mitchell and Kate Bush. Joni Mitchell's songs are directly about her personal experience, and she exposes who she is. It's raw. Whereas Kate Bush imagines that she's the ghost of a sea captain, or she imagines she's the ghost of the girl out of Wuthering Heights, Kathy, or she imagines that she's a Vietnamese fighting in the Vietnam War. She imagines she's a poltergeist, or she imagines she is like a Cockney robber, or she imagines she's a baby inside the womb of a mother who is going through a nuclear holocaust. She imagines these things. These two, Kate Bush is much more rooted in the older idea of songwriting than Joni Mitchell is. And I feel that Joni Mitchell is key in this. And I'll get to that in a minute, because another revolution happens in music and in songwriting in the 1960s. And this is the revolution that Bob Dylan brings about. In wanting a different life, a generation that had seen the First World War, then seen the Second World War, seen the falling out for that, and going, we don't want this to happen. We need to look at fascism and Nazism. We have to say, this is a terrible thing. We're never going to go there. And I don't want to be a cog in the machine like my parents. I don't want to dress like my parents. I want a new world. Surely we could have this utopian world that would be incredible. And a whole generation felt like that. And they were powered by that, by the affluence that had emerged after the Second World War. And so the voices of these archaic folk musicians that have been recorded in the 20s and 30s, they start to echo through. Now, the educated elite had spotted this, you know, in the 30s. You had people like Alan Lomax and John Lomax and John Hammond and a whole bunch of people sort of going down there to go, where's this esoteric knowledge that we can get from these low people in prisons and all that type of thing? And that starts to filter through. Woody Guthrie, who is basically a socialist, sees these folk music forms, sees what Leadbelly's doing and the protest that's inherent, and he arms it with an intellectual approach to songwriting, which brings in a political element. But it's much more about expressing that generation and how they feel in the post-war climate, which doesn't want to go back there and doesn't want to end up as a cog in the machine. Basically, they want a better life for themselves. And Bob Dylan, middle-class educated guy, gets into the folk scene. He sees what Woody Guthrie's doing, and he does the thing. He goes out and goes on the odyssey of going down there, searching for this song, and he spots it with Woody Guthrie, at that time, who is slowly being paralysed by a debilitating illness. Dylan then comes back, but then Dylan goes way past anything Woody Guthrie could have done, because he takes that idea of the political folk song and he actually widens it, and he brings a spirituality which embodies how that generation feels. So this now becomes the clarion call. It becomes a clarion call, and it's universal. And that generation that we're getting off on driving round to, you know, Little Richard songs and Chuck Berry songs and having a great time in the 1950s, you know, trying to work out what Tutti Frutti was about, you know. Suddenly they're a little bit older, and Dylan's coming and saying, you know, we don't have to live like this, we can live like this, you're part of this, you're part of that. And he also looks at the other aspect that's come from American folk forms, which is that recourse back to jazz and blues musicians of the 30s and 40s, and bringing that into popular music, which happens in my country, especially with the sort of blues boom, the electronic beat groups, the electric guitar. And suddenly Dylan's now pulling that in. That now sets up the idea of the singer-songwriter. That's the one that I grew up with, and it is this: that you are not going to write a song and imagine you are Dorothy in Wizard of Oz. You are going to look to yourself and you are going to sing about how you feel. And how you feel and how you see the world is going to have ramifications, because you are not going to kowtow to the prettiness and sort of bourgeois aspects of the songwriting that went before, which you see as trite. You put your Bing Crosby tunes on, and although they sold millions of White Christmas, you put that on, you think, no, that's not what I'm into. I want to express myself. And it doesn't matter if I cannot sing. It doesn't matter if I can't play very well. As long as I've got three chords of the truth. That punk ideal actually is in Dylan. But Dylan also has all the DNA to create prog and all the sophistication, because he democratizes. He says, you can do what you want. It becomes about you. And now this technology emerges in popular music that people can get a band, guitar, bass and drums, which is dead loud, and they can strum some chords, and they can bring out the sort of visceral elements of rock and roll, the beats and the riffs and all the stuff that's not about songs. And then they can put that to service to something which sounds like a rally call. And rally calls rally people. And the history of rock and roll is bands coming out, putting a song out, you know, and it's a rally call. It's a rally call, whether it be Irving Berlin, you know, come on, Alexander's Ragtime Band. Are you going to join in with Alexander's Ragtime Band, you know? Or 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, you know, and that's a rally call. But what Dylan does, he goes, hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me. He displaces it. He creates like a Pied Piper character, which is actually him. And we go, we're going to follow you. We're following you to a new utopian place. Now, for me, the great songwriter in history is Joni Mitchell. And the reason is because Joni Mitchell has the sublime aspect of loving the Tin Pan Alley jazz standard vocal group sound. The prettiness that is there in that, the bourgeois prettiness, she finds a way of breaking, of utilising that, but still breaking it up. So she is able to create melodies which are beautiful, but also can take the language. Dylan's vocal melodies, the meaning and language comes before the melody. Joni Mitchell has sophisticated melodies, and with the harmony, she goes away from the standard sort of 2-5-1 harmonic structures that created, you know, the standards and songs of the musicals that went before her, by utilising chord progressions that do not resolve. And that unresolvedness, which is in the personal life of Joni Mitchell, but also starts to embody how this generation feel as the utopian dream of the 1960s starts to break up. There's a rootlessness in Joni Mitchell's music, which is in the harmony and it's in the lyrics. She sings a lot about the seasons passing, time passing. She sings a lot about moving away, of being rootless, of putting on your ice skates and waiting for winter so you can actually use this frozen surface of water to skate away. You'll name your child that was given away that you didn't want to, the thing that you lost that made you rootless, you call them Little Green, because it will, in that name, embody some sort of truth into that. And this is all real stuff. And she opens up that aspect of her. So I would say, in terms of the great songwriters of the 20th century, the virtues that we have there is that they tell you something about themselves, that there is an authenticity to the message, and their message is at once local and subjective and about them, but is also presented in a way where it has great, profound meaning to the whole of everybody, that you can read it and see something in that. And within that, in the very mechanism of the songwriting, which is basically the melody and the way the melody moves against the chords and the way the chords provide consonance or dissonance, or in Joni Mitchell's case, just irresolution. So we just hang. Right? And also we see a breakthrough in the 60s from James Brown, you know, which comes from the sort of rhythm and blues, post-modal jazz. You know, you get instrumental tracks like Roadrunner, and then you get Cold Sweat. And suddenly songs are now modal, and they do not have that storytelling aspect to the harmony. And then that comes back in on itself. So there's a sophistication that emerges in the 70s. And when I did my list of great songwriters, I put Donald Fagen on, and the reason why I put Donald Fagen on is because this is at 3 chords and the truth. This is 100 extended chords and the truth. And the truth is hidden because we don't know whether he's telling the truth or not. It's sophisticated. And when you put it on, whether you like it or not, and I've been critical of Steely Dan, but this is sophisticated songwriting. I believe there needs to be a sophistication that aligns in a truthful way with the story, the idea of talking about not just useful things like don't eat those berries, but talking about profound things that religion also would deal with. So there's life lessons, there's things that to be learned, and then the ideas of the singer-songwriter that's pulled from themselves, and that the very pulling from themselves is part of the process. Okay, so half an hour in. That is what I would say is a great song. So we can now look at some of these songwriters and go, well, no, they aren't utilising harmony in that way. They're not telling a story. It's not profound. And then people go, well, it will be profound. And you can't put in what you think about it. Now, this is, I think, comes to the issue that we have and why these sort of videos are compelling, and why looking at these terrible lists that come out of the sort of Rolling Stone or New York Times, and you watch it and go, they got it so wrong. Well, they are embodying, I think, a virtue which no longer has any utility. I've tried to describe it in this talk. The idea that we can go to other voices, and those voices are authentic and they tell the truth, almost in their naivety, and then the ability to package those things up and sell that message, which is political, and it's left-wing political. It's about creating a utopia in which everyone can express themselves and live in perfect harmony. Those ideas, I think, are just wound in to the idea of the singer-songwriter. I really need to get aggressive in my description of this, so I will now. So please apologise for me telling a version of this which might be exaggerated, but I do it for a reason, for an aesthetic reason. The New York Times is populated by a certain elite, an educated elite that could well have got their cushy jobs in the New York Times because of connections, you know, which I haven't got, and I imagine most of you haven't got. In doing that, they need to parrot what I think are virtues that have now atrophied. And this is what they do. They say, when we listen to a song's not about technique. Technique doesn't make a great song. That was established by rock and roll. We could say Mozart's great and Bach's great, and there's a great amount of technique and knowledge and skill in creating those tunes. But we've sort of gone past that. This is the three chords of the truth thing. And in that, this allows people from the other side of the tracks to tell us what life's like. And then us being the gatekeeping elites, what we can do, which is virtuous, is represent these people. Now, what has happened in music is the music industry starts, and there's this thing called popular music. And it contains people like Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell and Bruce Springsteen. But this has carried on all the way through. There is a history that starts with rock and roll in the 1950s. You've got Little Richard, and you've got like Chuck Berry, and then Elvis Presley comes along, and he's a white man. Although he's a very poor and uneducated white man, he's still a white man that steals, because that's what the white man does. There's a colonialism going on. Bob Dylan doesn't know that because he's aware of it, because he's one of us. Unlike Elvis, he's one of us. He's the educated middle-class Jewish elite, and he knows how to present it and knows it right. He respects that kind of truth, even though he exhibits the fact that he doesn't respect it. And I felt that Dylan, the key to Dylan is realising that he's more interesting when he's trying to blow that up than putting it forth. That's another thing. Now, so we are going to use our privilege to push all these incredible people. Now, because we believe that rock and roll has just developed down a line and it's just all pop, the same thing, popular music, anybody who's around now must be the new Chuck Berry, or they must be the new Bob Dylan, or they must be the new Curtis Mayfield, or the new Ramones. This is just a follow-on from that. We assume that. So we are going to look around, and because we exist as this sort of elitist gatekeeper, we don't believe, and this is the crux of it, we don't believe that having a specialist knowledge about music will help you understand what is great. Because the greatness is embodied in all these virtues that Andy's just been telling you about. Right? You don't have to have skill. You don't have to be able to sing. As long as you're telling the truth. Now, what is the truth? The truth is what these rappers are saying. Kendrick Lamar's telling the truth. Listen to it. And there is skill there, but it's a different type of skill. And you're ignoring it, Andy. You're saying that this isn't a song. You're saying that rap is not a song. It is a song, but it's a new type of song, and you're too old to understand it. They are stood up. They have very simple beats. These beats propel you like rock and roll did. They do exactly what Bob Dylan did, and then they tell you the truth. It's like a postcard from hell. It's like a postcard from the other side of the track. So they tell you how it is, and you may find that uncomfortable being a white middle-aged man, but you have to open yourselves up. And when you sit there pontificating about how these aren't songs, you don't understand it. These are as great as the earlier songs, because we don't believe in greatness. You don't understand. We believe in cultural relativism, and we believe it's all sort of the same. And we don't believe that there's such a thing as good or bad. We don't believe that these artists are better than somebody else. So what we're doing here is we are presenting all this different stuff, and you can't be there telling me what's right or wrong. I decide whether something's good or not, and us have decided this, and that's the list. Now, what I've tried to show you there with that was acted a little bit. I don't believe in all of that, but I'm trying through the use of drama, the use of the monologue, to not be me, but to talk in a way where their presumptions that they have that are embodied in their lists don't make sense. And that, I think, is what people spot. They don't make sense. These people are pushing the idea of quality, of virtue, but they believe that that is relative. They do not value anything to do with skill, but they think there's an sort of alternative skill which is hidden sort of essentially in the music. And they believe that popularity is democratic, so it is the benchmark of what is artistically successful, despite the fact that the whole history of art proves that that's not the case. And so there is an inherent contradiction. It is the contradiction of saying, here we have a list of virtue, but we do not believe in virtue. So what ends up going on that list? We know what goes on that list is everything that serves those people that are in the New York Times in terms of the virtue that they value. So what I'm saying is that what Bob Dylan was doing in 1964, of being a voice for a generation that were truly progressive and wanted everything to change, and then it crashed, and then songwriters dealt with that crash, right? And that was what was going on. And then these ideals suddenly were packaged up and became absolute moral virtues. And the establishment that would have once been going, oh no, you shouldn't really be listening to Bob Dylan or Jimi Hendrix, this is all young person stuff. You know, those values that they had then of not getting it, they can't believe that they are now the ones that aren't getting it. They think they are saying they think they are on the right side, but they never have been on the right side. Now, you're being told this by a bloke who's middle-aged, white, British. What do I know? Why are you even listening to me? What's the point? I can't know. And it's very easy to go, Andy doesn't know anything, or it's just his opinion. He's just putting his things on. He sounded a little bit right-wing at one point, and we hate right-wing people, because the elites, we like the left-wing, even though we're all about money, and every person we're pushing. And their genius are these more recent artists, is they're brilliant businessmen or brilliant businesswomen. They've been able to survive in an industry which is very, very cutthroat. I've always been aware of that. The truly great artists get eaten up. They get eaten up by this business, and then they're held high. But of course, this is living artists, so there's no Kurt Cobain there, there's no Jimi Hendrix there, there's none of those people can be put on the list, because it's living artists. They've survived. What I'm trying to say is, there is a strange intellectual framework we can put on this, which is counterintuitive, and it's difficult to describe. I always believed when I was teaching that when I went out to teach, I had to tell the students something counterintuitive. I had to tell them something that didn't feel like it was right to them, because what is intuitive, you will be able to take on board and learn from. But the counterintuitive, that is what you need a teacher for. And so if you suddenly got into sailing, for example, and I'm thinking that you need to put the sail in a certain place, and my intuitive gut reaction is to do that, but when you do that, the bloody ship falls over or whatever, and the experienced sailor goes, no, what you have to do is this. You go, really? Oh yeah. Then you try it, you go, oh my God, really? That seems counterintuitive, and it works. All the stuff in art and music which is of value is the counterintuitive stuff. It's the stuff that's hard to reach to. Innovators have to sort of take the art form and reach out into the dark, into what they find is counterintuitive. Great artists often will not understand what they are doing themselves, and the compulsion to do it is a really strange thing, and it's not understood by the New York Times. And I'm not saying the people that are on this list, the modern artists, they don't have this. But the trouble is, we are not in a history of popular music that's a straight line. All the values I described about songwriting died. They stopped, and something else came in its place. It was replaced in terms of popular music with what was there before. Before all this emerged, you go back to 1953, you go, well, what's the biggest song in the world? How much is that doggy in the window? That's the biggest song in the world, right? Trite, shallow, in the mind of a child, immature, entertaining, cute, that is what we have now. But it's stoked up with the most aggressive marketing technology that's ever existed in the history of man. And so these songs are not songs, they're memes. They're things that survive on TikTok because they're like 3 or 4 seconds long. And these artists become huge, not because they're great songwriters, but because they embody that thing I discussed that was right at the start. The idea of the star, the celebrity, has eaten itself. The celebrity is a thing in itself. And the celebrity always will be the gaze, the seductive gaze into the camera, or the seductive voice up against the mic that comes up close in this modern technology and speaks to you directly. So what is this counterintuitive thing? What's the counterintuitive thing? Well, I am saying it. I could be wrong. I'm an old bloke, like you said, and I'm middle-aged, and I'm a male, and I'm British, and maybe my voice is not as worthy because of not what I'm saying, but who I am. But maybe those values which were once useful, in the same way as a songwriter imagining that their 14-year-old girl was once useful and then it was no longer useful. Maybe the fact is these values that are embodied in the New York Times, that are embodied in Rolling Stone, no longer work. Right? And maybe the idea of going, no, that's a song, and that is what a song does, and this is something else. And this is, and I'm now going to say it, is objectively good. I am proffering the idea that we, as artists, need to entertain the idea of objective goodness. And the audience not only has to explore these ideas and find those compelling, which I think people are, that seems to be something that real skill, real ability is rewarded on the internet. That's what I mean. And people sit there and they go, oh my God, that's amazing. That's amazing. Oh my God, you see that singer? They did that and then they sang 2 notes at the same time. And they sang in a way that really... And this is rewarded. It's rewarded. But what's interesting is how the audience is so enmeshed with this. Because you could do exactly the same thing. And here we arrive at something which is far more profound. The song fitted on the side of a 78 record. The song could exist in a film with a song and dance routine that was like a scene in a film. The song itself had utility. But all the things we discussed that a song does can be done in different ways. And could it be that the very idea of the song itself, the virtuous song that I've described, which has all these incredible chord twists and it's musically beautiful, and like Joni Mitchell, it holds hands exactly with the profundity of the message, maybe that in itself no longer is relevant. Maybe you can get more from somebody talking to you like this into a camera, which has the democratization that Dylan had, because as you can see, there is nothing technologically going on. I've got a camera and I've got my new clip-on mic. There's no editing. I will literally go home, take the memory card out, and I will upload this. You have just listened to me talk about this for 45 minutes. I'm a musician. I'm a trained musician. I've been trying to write songs all my life. I was always interested in that abstract, absolute music, and I champion it here. But what's weird in my personal life, if I was to be the Dylan and think what's happened to me, what's the profound thing that's happened to me, is the fact that I am old, that I shouldn't have a voice. I should only have a voice in my world when I'm like 23, 24. Once you get to like 40, it's over. But suddenly my life's not over, because I'm here talking to you like this, and you're listening, and you could comment on it. And you could do this too, or not. You're free to do so. And so suddenly, after being someone who's been obsessed with the abstract beauty of abstract music and feeling it was higher in some way than the song being a lower form, is now making my living by trying to come out here and talk to you lot in a way that compels you and holds you here. That's quite bizarre. When I finish this video, I will be wiped out. Really wiped out. I will go home, and by 5 or 6 o'clock I will be drifting out, because these take it out of me. They really do take it out of me. There is a lot of preparation to get to the point where you go, right, I've got all my ducks in the row, I know what I'm about to talk about. Now let's start and see where it goes. There's a director in the UK called Michael Lee. He did films like Life is Sweet, what was it, Secrets and Lies, a whole bunch of it. I was very influenced by him when I was younger. And it was the process he used to create his films, in that he would create a scenario, he would bring the actors in, and then the actors would rehearse, work out who they are, create their backstories, and they would keep secrets from one another. And then in the rehearsal process, he would bring that to a certain point, and then let the actors improvise and let their story unfold organically, which then he would document and then create the script from that. So when you watch a Mike Leigh film, people are performing a script, but they're performing a script that was created in the person knowing who they are, but not what they are about to do in that moment. The Goodfellas scene where he goes, you know, do you think I'm funny? Do I amuse you? That was also done the same way. That was improvised in the rehearsal room, and then it was notated, and then they act out what they said on the spot. Certain films like Lars von Trier's Dogma films, which had an influence on things like Blair Witch Project, but also things like Spinal Tap or even Ghostbusters, have improvisatory aspects where the storyline shifts in what's happening in real time. One of the best examples of this is the Nativity films. These are family films, but that whole story is improvised. So if one of the actors improvises something strange, I think at some point somebody just mentions this Christmas pig. I think it's the Christmas pig or the Yuletide pig. And later on in the film, you see the Yuletide pig that is based upon what happened in the moment, right? I feel that there is a truth in that we can apply to music. And I wonder whether the song now needs to shift to be of the moment. That is what I think. It's a very hard thing to put into words. But do we have to? Because the music industry is gone. We don't need songs. We don't need guitar, bass and drums. We don't need drum machines. We don't even need AI music. That is all gone. And I know I'm a musician, and there is something creative here. I'm aware of it, and I'm trying to get to it, and I'm trying to reach at it. And I'm hoping that in my idiocy, by putting myself in this situation, I might be able to stumble onto something in real time. And the in real time stumbling will be a part of the thing. It will be, oh my God, he's doing this right now and it's in front of us. And I can see it in front of us and it's real. And that idea of authenticity shifts. It shifts because you know there is no way I could have done the Mike Lee, then I've scripted this and I am now, so I'd have to be a genius. And there's no reason to do that. That's the democratization, perhaps. What does this mean? I don't know. I don't know. And a point that has troubled me throughout this video is rap a song or is it something else? One of the big differences between rap and singer-songwriters, that singer-songwriters work those lyrics to death. Now rappers do, but they can also freestyle rap. And that taps into the unconscious. But I think here, I'm at the limits, and this is where me being a middle-aged white British bloke does have its limits. I don't think I'm going to be able to come up with the structure that is so revolutionary that it then moves music forward. Or maybe I'm in the trap of thinking it has to come from the young because of the very dogmas. You see, I don't know. Maybe it does come from somewhere else. Maybe it does come from an old bloke. Maybe it does come from somewhere else. You know, maybe there's hope for us all. Maybe all the old people are watching me talking this and they're nodding along going, this is interesting what Andy's saying. And then they have that glimmer of hope, don't they? Maybe I could still do something that was worthwhile. Maybe my voice is needed. Maybe my wisdom is valued. Maybe. What's my conclusion? We need to have a conversation about virtue. We have to shift what we think virtue and quality and good is. And we have to move away from the sort of postmodernist, there is no good, because that in itself is a dogma of what is good, right? And it eats itself. And I've tried to show how it eats itself. And those New York critics coming up with that list, they haven't got a clue about this. It's just the establishment trumpeting its own dogma. And the artist should always be pushing against that. And when you do that, it chimes with people. Except for those on the left who feel that I'm pushing against something I shouldn't be doing. They are now the establishment. I've no problem with the left. I just really wish they'd wake up and realise they are the establishment. And that changes the nature of songwriting. Maybe. Like, subscribe, all that. Hope you enjoyed this. And please support the Philosophy Sunday videos because I really want these to survive in this cutthroat YouTube world where it's just about views and doing outlandish stuff and saying outlandish things so the audience will get wound up and will get all angry and then put stuff in the comments which makes it look like there's more people watching it and engaging with it and all that. And I have to press that button over and over and over again.